Hey everyone, it's Mystery Girl with Missy, and I'm Missy. Welcome back. Before we get into it, please hit that like button. It helps get my videos out into the algorithm so others can find them and view them. I want to thank you so much for being a subscriber. Whether you're new or previous, thank you so much. And I just want to thank you all for your support. You know how much it means to me. Today we're going to discuss the Gilgo Beach Murders. But we're not going to discuss what everybody else is discussing. I want to talk about the original suspects. Everyone's talking about Rex Heuermann. But what about all of the original suspects dated back from the 1990s when these murders actually began? That's what I want to talk about. Just because Rex was found and his DNA matches 3 of the Gilgo 4 does not mean that he is responsible for every murder that occurred from 1996 to current. Now they just talk about from 2010, okay, but what about from 1996 to 2010 and then from 2010 and on? You know, it's kind of weird how they're forgetting about everyone else that was a suspect and how the chief of police actually prevented the FBI from doing an investigation into this. So that's what I want to talk about, because yes, they might have found Rex Heuermann, who was responsible for these 3, possibly 4, but he's not responsible for them all, is he? Now I ask you to please remember that all suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Whether they're arrested or just being named a suspect, they are innocent until proven guilty. John Bittrolff, I can't pronounce it right, September 2017, was named a possible suspect in the Gilgo Beach Murders. Now, he is just one of the ones that was named. There was many others. While Rex Heuermann has been arrested in connection with the Gilgo Beach Murders, John Bittrolff was once linked to the Long Island serial killer case, as per the Suffolk County DA. Now, many were linked and were considered suspects, but they haven't been mentioned since Rex Heuermann has been arrested. Why is that? The first victim to be identified was Jessica Taylor, who was found in Manorville on Long Island, which is probably about 45, 50, maybe even a little bit further away from Gilgo Beach. Now this was July 26th of 2003. A woman walking her dog along secluded Horsley Manor Road in Manorville discovered a body that was later identified as that of Jessica Taylor. 8 years later, her additional remains were found 50 miles away on the side of Ocean Parkway. Now, to give you an idea, 50 miles away. So part of her body was found in Manorville and the other part was found on Ocean Parkway. That was not Rex Heuermann's MO. He wrapped the bodies in burlap. So this is where my questions come in. How can he be connected to all of them? He's not. There is still somebody out there, and they are not mentioning the original suspects, and I truly hope they are still looking into them. Like I said, John Bittrolff was named a possible suspect. He was a Suffolk County resident. He was convicted of murder in May 2017 of 2 sex workers, Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee, I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong, and the suspect in the murder of a third. The 2 bodies were found in 1993 and 1994. Now, like I said, this goes way further back. This goes back to possibly the 80s. It's just a matter of when the first bodies were located. Now, he is and was a suspect in at least 1 Long Island serial killer murder, which is known as Lisk. Bittrolff lived in Manorville, 3 miles from where the torso of Lisk victims, Jessica Taylor and Valerie McNee were recovered. Just because they were found in the same area does not mean it was the same person. Different MOs. Usually a serial killer has a trademark, has a same MO. Rex Heuermann was the burlap bags. So I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. There's still somebody out there that is connected to these. He was never officially named a suspect. One of his known victims' daughters was friends with Melissa Bartholomew, who is one of the Gilgo Four. Now, there's a connection there. So the connection, who knows, maybe he was a friend of Rex Heuermann, maybe they worked together. Things still need to be looked into. Maybe they were just friends because they were both sex workers. Maybe it's a coincidence. There's just so many questions that still stand. John was arrested July 21st of 2014 for 2 of the murders. DNA connected him to Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee. He's convicted for the 2 murders in July 5th of 2017. These murders took place with Rita being found on November 2nd, 1993, and Colleen being found January 5th, 1994. Also, John is a suspect in the murder of Sandra Castillo. September 2017, he was found guilty and sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders in the 1993 and the one in 1994. So, because there is a connection with Melissa Bartholomew, who's one of the Gilgo Four, I think there's still more to look into. I think they should pull his DNA again and see, is there any connection to any of the ones that are connected to Rex Heuermann, because there were many bodies that were found, part of bodies that were found out east. Again, there was no burlap. So Rex Heuermann, in my opinion anyway, cannot be connected to Jessica Taylor and the bodies that were found decapitated, where part of their bodies were found on the eastern Long Island side and other parts were found on Robert Moses. In my opinion, that tells me there is more than one murderer that is out there. Let's get into the next suspect. Well, he was actually never named an actual suspect. Joseph Brewer, who was Shannon Gilbert's client the night that she went missing. He was never named a suspect after having a polygraph done, which he passed. I don't understand a lot of why Joseph Brewer was not looked into more. In his polygraph, he stated that he was up on the 3rd floor smoking a cigarette when Shannon left the house, and she ran out into the brush with her phone in her pocket or in her hand. She was on the phone with 911. She had actually called the police from hiding behind a couch in Brewer's house, saying, "There's somebody after me." The 911 operator asks, "Where are you, ma'am?" She says, "I don't know." The operator says, "Are you driving right now?" And she said, "No, I'm inside the house." She was literally hiding behind his couch, and for some reason she was terrified. Whether she was drugged or something, I don't know. Nobody will actually ever know except for the 2 that were in the house that night. But she was terrified. When she ran out of that house, she ran knocking on doors looking for help. And he said he was up on the 3rd floor balcony smoking a cigarette when she ran out of the house. Joseph Brewer actually had gone out to Michael Pack, who was sitting in the car outside, who was Shannon's driver and security guard. And when he came into the house, Joseph was trying to get her out and Michael Pack was trying to talk to her, but poor Shannon was so terrified. She was actually afraid of her own security guard. They're saying, "Are you gonna kill me?" Which brings us on to our next suspect that wasn't named a suspect, Michael Pack, Shannon's driver and security guard. Michael Pack was actually also given a polygraph, which he passed. In his polygraph, he stated that he saw Michael Brewer up on the porch smoking a cigarette, but his car was literally on the opposite side of the house, and there was no way he could see through the house to see Michael Pack up there smoking a cigarette. So were these two men in connection somehow that night? That Shannon was actually fearing both of them? When Shannon was talking to Michael, it was inaudible at first, but then she's saying to her driver, "You're going to kill me." Michael Pack says no, and she says, "You're going to kill me." And then it went inaudible. The operator kept trying to get Shannon's attention, but whether she put the phone in her pocket or whatever, I'm not sure. No, again, nobody will ever know except for her. But these two men, they both had the same story about Joseph smoking the cigarette, but Michael Pack could have never seen him smoking that cigarette. How did they pass this polygraph? Why wasn't DNA ever taken after Shannon's body was found? Did they ever try to compare DNA? They might have taken DNA. I shouldn't say why didn't they. I don't know for sure. But these two men, I still believe, should be being looked into to this day. The next is Dr. Peter Hackett, who is a neighbor of Joseph Brewer, who was Shannon's client the night that she went missing, who called Shannon's mother and said that he ran a wayward house for girls. When Dr. Hackett called Shannon's mother, he told her that Shannon was at the wayward house. Dr. Hackett was never officially named a suspect. Today lives in Fort Myers, Florida. Dr. Peter Hackett, also known as Charles Peter Hackett, according to court records, was a neighbor of Joseph Brewer. He called Shannon's mother 2 days after she went missing, again stating that he ran a wayward house, halfway house for girls, and he called from his wife's phone. He initially denied calling Shannon's mom, Marie, or Mary. I don't know how it was pronounced. I'm so sorry. But he initially denied to News 12 ever calling Shannon's mother, saying he never saw Shannon Gilbert. But phone records proved differently. He was a security guard at the community where Shannon went missing. He was emergency services. So he was a security guard. He was Brewer's neighbor. He called Shannon's mom. And the other thing is, he was a physician that once worked for the Suffolk County Police. According to Gilbert's attorney, Hackett was formerly a surgeon for the Suffolk County Police Department. Hackett said that the Suffolk County Police Department fired him after he claimed to be at work when he wasn't. Now, was he trying to use the police department when questioned where he was and said he was working? I don't know when he said he was at work and he wasn't. I don't know the specific date of that, but he was fired for claiming he was at work when he wasn't. Mary Gilbert, Shannon's mother, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Dr. Hackett. So now we have Michael, we have Brewer, and we have Dr. Hackett. And all three of them that evening were acting so strange. You have Brewer, who hired Shannon, trying to get her out of the house. She was in a panic. Why was she in a panic? Michael Pack followed her down the road while she was running through the brush and knocking on doors looking for help, but really never did anything to help her. Michael Pack backed Brewer's story, which he couldn't have done because he couldn't have seen through the house when he was parked on the other side. And then Dr. Hackett calls Shannon's mom saying she's at his wayward house for girls. He didn't even use his phone. He used his wife's phone. So those three men that evening and 2 days up to 2 days later were so odd that I can't believe that they weren't continued to be looked into. But as we go further into this video, there's more connections to these three men and to that evening with Shannon Gilbert. Shannon Gilbert, the attention that was brought to her was the reason that the Gilgo 4 was actually found. So Shannon's name is going to come up a lot, and it's because she's actually a big major reason that these bodies were actually found, because they found the Gilgo 4 and the additional bodies that were found out there while looking for Shannon. If they didn't go out there to look for her, they might not have ever found these bodies, which again kind of creeps me out, because 1996 was the first time I had ever gone to Gilgo Beach, and knowing that there was bodies in the brush right next to where I was, and we were there at night, to this day really creeps me out. It really just, like, the thought of it is kind of terrifying in a way. I mean, while we were there at night, because it was late, could these bodies have been being dumped there? There was some there already. Just, you know, the thoughts are horrible. But these three men, there was something up. There was definitely something up that night. Now, Police Chief James Burke, he blocked the FBI from having any involvement in looking for the serial killer from 2012 to 2015. Why? So many people believe that James Burke was behind something. He was never named a suspect, but he was definitely, in my eyes and in so many other people's eyes, behind something. Now, James Burke was the police chief for Suffolk County. I believe it was the 4th or the 5th precinct. He resigned from the department in October 2015. He was indicted for civil rights violations and conspiracy for beating up Chris, who is pictured in this photo right here. He blocked the FBI involvement from January 2012 to October 2015. My question is, why? Why would you block the FBI from helping find a serial killer? In my eyes, you're covering it up. Why were you covering it up? James Burke was known to go out to Oak Beach to parties where there was prostitutes. And did he know Brewer? Did he know Dr. Hackett? Dr. Hackett worked for the police department as well. Was he covering something up? Or was he somehow involved? These are questions I have. That's Steve Ballone in the background of him, who put him into office as chief of police. There's just so many questions, and Ballone, by the way, is still in office to this day. But there's so many questions I have about Burke, and I know I am not the only one. When they said that they had arrested somebody as the serial killer, I was definitely thinking that Burke was behind bars for this. And I was wrong, but I still question, why aren't they looking into him still? Why aren't they looking into any of these people still? Because Rex Heuermann, in my eyes, is not responsible for all of these murders that happened on Long Island. So again, James Burke was never named a suspect. He kicked out all task forces. He kicked out the FBI out of the investigation. He stopped talking to the press. In 1995, he was caught having sex with a sex worker in his police cruiser and lost his gun to the sex worker during this to her. He was found guilty on all of these counts. He only got 15 days suspension and transferred to a different precinct. A few years later, he was promoted after having a relationship with a prostitute. He asked former detective Rob Trotta, who is now a legislator, I don't know if he currently is, but he was a legislator of Suffolk County, the first time that he met Burke, So the first time that Burke met legislator Rob Trotta, Burke asked him, "I hear you are a heavy hitter. I want you to work for me." Then asked him, "Where can I get a snuff film?" Trotta did not know what a snuff film was, and either do I, and did I. But Burke explained that a snuff film is when there is a video of you having sex with a woman and then you kill her and her body reacts a certain way. Excuse me? So right there, he's talking about killing somebody to a legislator and that he enjoys watching these kind of films. Not that he killed somebody, but he enjoys watching how a woman's body reacts after being killed if you have sex with her. And this guy is not named a suspect. Why? Burke and the snuff films came out a lot during the investigation. Burke, in a house on Oak Beach, had an encounter with a sex worker who I had pictured here in the video. This woman said that Burke forced her to perform rough oral sex on him. And there's actually a full interview of it. I'm sure you can find it somewhere on YouTube. But so here we are again. Burke having a connection with prostitution. James Burke shows up at Chris Loeb's house. Now, we're going to get into Chris Loeb. Chris Loeb was a heroin addict who was struggling to get his act clean. He was trying to get his next fix, and he broke into an SUV that belonged to Chief Officer Police Burke. I almost said jerk. Sorry, it kind of fits though. But wow, okay. Twist of the tongue, but I'm leaving it there. You guys know me. I say something wrong, I just kind of leave it there. I just fix it in my own words, but that was kind of funny. But Chris stole a duffel bag out of the SUV that belonged to James Burke. And when Chris got home, he opened the bag to disturbing items inside of it. There was sex toys, porn videos, plus several magazines of ammunition, boxes of cigars, a gun belt, a humidor, toiletries, clothing. So James Burke shows up at Chris's house, where he lives with his mother, and beats Chris in front of his mom. Brings him back to the Suffolk County precinct in the interrogation room with no cameras, conveniently, and he continues to beat him and then threatens him with a hot shot. Guys, what is wrong with this cop, and how did he get away with a lot of things? I mean, he was arrested for this, but how did he get away with so much for so long? How did this man, Steve Ballone, right there, pictured behind him, put this man into office as a chief? I don't understand it. I don't understand a lot behind Burke. So after beating Chris and threatening him with a hot shot, which I didn't know what it was, but what it is, it's a shot of heroin, and it will make it look like he had overdosed. So he was threatening to kill him. Burke also threatened to rape Chris's mother and then continues to beat him. Another detective had to pull Burke off of Chris. So another detective there had to literally get involved. Chris went to jail for the burglaries, breaking into Burke's car. It's just unbelievable that after being beaten and everything, they still sent him to jail. I mean, I get it. He broke into a car, but he was beaten and threatened. His life was threatened. His mother's was threatened to be raped by a police officer, the chief of police. Burke blackmailed officers to lie for him. Prosecutors found a cover-up that they say went all the way to the top of the local law enforcement in Suffolk County. Burke was arrested by the FBI in 2015 and arraigned December 9th, 2015. Eventually, Burke was prosecuted for these crimes. He pleaded guilty in February of 2016 to civil rights violations against Chris. He went to prison and was sentenced to 46 months and 3 years supervised release. He is currently out of prison and still living in Suffolk County. That right there is the prostitute that Burke had perform rough oral sex. She did a whole interview with Shannon's attorney, actually was there. So here is Burke being arrested for the civil rights violations. Why did Burke go so far out of his way to cover up things that were going on with serial murder, body after body being found at Oak Beach? When Burke was known to hang out in Oak Beach, this is a more current photo of Burke. He was known to hang out at Oak Beach at parties in the community where Shannon went missing, and prostitutes were at these parties. He was into snuff films. He held the FBI back. I am so curious what this man has that they have not looked further into what he was covering up, who he was protecting, if he himself was involved in any of those murders. Like I said, all the murders that happened on Long Island, I don't believe was one murderer. There's all different MOs. But what is his involvement? I still want to know to this day. Rex Heuermann. Rex was recently arrested, June 14th, 2023, arrested in connection with the murder of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. His DNA is connected by hair on Amber, and his wife's hair was on the other two. Don't understand that. He had 7 burner phones and posted photos of selfies to the escorts from the burner phones. He was connected by DNA that was found in a pizza box on a pizza crust. And the connection and similarities between the girls that Rex was involved with or suspectedly involved with was they were bound by burlap, camouflage burlap that the suspect used to hide the body. So it was camouflage so it would blend in with the surrounding in the area. The investigators tracked the cell phone's activity to 4 separate towers around the area of Massapequa Park. And guess, I don't know if you guys know this, but Rex Heuermann actually went to school with Billy Baldwin. The Baldwins, Alec Baldwin, Billy Baldwin, they are from Massapequa Park. And Billy Baldwin actually went to school with Rex Heuermann. They weren't friends, but they went to school together, and Billy actually knew him. So anyway, back to the burner phones. He used the burner phones to communicate with the victims and then discarded the phone immediately. They were positively ID'd in March of 2022. A witness described him after seeing a girl or someone get into his Chevy Avalanche. Police now have the Avalanche. He's still driving this same truck from around 2010. That's kind of weird that, you know, he would keep the truck. Was it like kind of one of his trophies? But anyway, he was seen with a victim in this Avalanche, and that's kind of the way that they started putting the pieces together. Once the FBI was able to get back in, when Burke was gone, they were actually able to put a lot of pieces together. They put the task force together, and within less than a year, they were actually able to come up with so much information and with new ways of finding DNA. They were able to find Rex Heuermann, who was responsible for the 3 girls, Melissa, Megan, and Amber, and the DNA, the hair sample on the 4th of the Gilgo 4 is still being looked into, so he's listed a prime suspect of Maureen. So the new task force used mitochondria DNA to check the DNA, and these bodies were all located 25 feet off the roadside. They weren't even that far off the highway, which is crazy to me. Cell phone records do show that his wife was out of town when he was involved with the women who ended up deceased on the side of the road on Ocean Parkway. At first I was questioning, why is his wife's hair on these girls? Why is the DNA matching his wife? But there is evidence that she was not around when these were taking place. The DNA was found on these girls, so that's, a lot of the reason why they were looking so deeply into Rex Heuermann's house. Did he, maybe bring these girls there, do whatever he did to them, and then bring them over to the Gilgo Beach to dump them? He was maybe 15 minutes away from the Gilgo Beach area. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. No murder weapons were found, but he had 92 gun permits, and there was like over 200 guns, I think, taken out of his house. So, I mean, they haven't released all of the evidence, which I'm sure, we might not know for a while. They got to use it for, court. But his DNA was on Megan. He had a collection of weapons that was removed from the home on 7/16. They searched his Amityville storage unit on 7/17. Again, who knows what they had was in there. He had an architect business in Manhattan, which he opened the company in 1996. And 1996 was when one of the first bodies were found, and that was in Blue Point in Suffolk County. He was a resident of Massapequa Park. He had a residence in Massachusetts, and there's just a lot of information that is still coming out about Rex. And I know I've said it earlier in the video, but I'm going to say it again. I do not believe that Rex is responsible for all the murders that occurred on Long Island from the late 80s, mid 80s, and on. There's definitely more that needs to be looked into here. Here are some more photos of the Gilgo Beach area, the search, and the victims. I will discuss some more of the victims and some more of the possible suspects. Yes, there has been justice for 3 of these girls, possibly 4, but there were so many more that were murdered on Long Island, and these searches need to continue to find who is responsible for them. Another suspect that was named, a possible suspect, was James Burke. Unfortunately, he committed suicide in his car at Mattatuck Park 2 days after Shannon Gilbert's remains were found. One of his businesses was at a plant nursery, a main supplier of burlap in the region. Now my question is, was this man possibly connected to Rex Heuermann? Did he supply him with the burlap? So again, stuff still needs to be looked into. Another suspect was Andrew Frey. He was arrested for trying to kidnap 2 sex workers on separate occasions. He was charged with multiple counts of attempted sex trafficking and attempted kidnapping. He has a history of violence against sex workers. Federal investigators examining if there is any connection to the Gilgo Beach murders. So these searches need to continue. besides the Gilgo Four and Amber, there are others that were murdered out there. There was a Jane Doe who was known as Cherries, and there was Tanya Rush in June 27, 2008. There was a male, John Doe. There was the male that was pictured earlier, who was dressed as a woman. So was somebody meeting up with him, thought he was a woman and found out that he was a man. There was Melissa. There was Amber. There was Shannon. And there was another Jane Doe, who partial of her remains were found. A lot of these people, partial of their remains were found in one place, and then the rest of their remains were found on the Oak Beach roadway. There was Natasha Hugo. There was another John Doe, who was later named as Andre Jamal Isaac. There were so many. There was Peaches. They named the one Peaches, which I showed the tattoo. There was a baby found with Peaches. There were so many more victims of the Gilgo Beach murders, and there were so many suspects that were named in the beginning of looking into this case. And then James Burke gets involved in 2010, and everything is put to a halt. Everything is put to a halt, and nothing is looked into from 2012 to 2015. What was he covering up? Were Rex Brewer, Dr. Bissett, were any of these other people involved in some way, whether it be a cover-up or actually being involved? There were so many lives taken on Long Island. Just like, you had the son of Sam in New York City in 1977, that they were able to find him because they had a task force and they did everything right. If they were able to do everything right in 1977 in New York and catch the son of Sam, why weren't they able to find these Gilgo Beach connection murders? And was it just a dumping ground for multiple murderers, or were they somehow connected? There, I believe, needs to be so much more looked into. Just because one man is arrested, the MOs need to be looked at. And like I said, there's different MOs. There were bodies that were decapitated, some parts found in suitcases, parts found in eastern Long Island over by Manorville, some found in Blue Point, some on Fire Island, with the rest of their remains found on Ocean Parkway. Like I said, I grew up on Long Island, so I was around on Long Island when all of this was going on. I remember all the news reports. I remember all the background history. And I truly, truly feel that this needs to be continued to be looked into, and more needs to be spoken about it. In the comments below, tell me, do you think Rex Heuermann is responsible for all the murders on Long Island since 1996 and before? Or is there more to it? And do you think that James Burke is covering up something, or was he somehow involved? I really want to thank you all for watching. Your support means so much to me. And just please hit that like button. That helps get my videos out into the algorithm, and it really does a lot to support my channel. Thank you again for being here. And guys, remember, every day is a mystery.